Good morning, and welcome to today's webcast, Developing Leaders to Become an Employer of Choice. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome, and thanks for joining. We're pleased to present our continuing professional education webcast series. Before we begin, please keep the following in mind. You can customize how you view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top right of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons that relate to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF of today's slides from the Slide Deck and Handouts widget. You can ask questions by typing in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. Today's session offers 1 CPE credit. To receive credit, you must meet the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy requirements. You must attend at least 50 minutes of the session and respond to at least 75% of polling questions. To participate in the polls, please check the button next to your answer within the slide window and click Submit. We'll track your progress and alert you when you've earned CPE credit. You can then click the certificate icon in the CPE Progress widget and download your CPE certificate. Don't worry if you can't download your CPE certificate today. We'll email you a copy in 2 weeks. If attending this webcast in a group, you must complete our group CPE attendance sheet, available in our Slide Deck and Handouts widget to receive credit. Please have all group members sign it and send only 1 sheet per group. CPE credit can only be awarded to participants registered as themselves and isn't available for participants who view the on-demand version. This presentation is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters from Moss Adams, Brett Addis, Practice Director, and LeeAnn Stivers, Senior Manager. With that, I'll turn it over to Brett to get us started.
Thanks, Chad, and thanks everybody for joining today. I'm really excited about this presentation. LeeAnn, I think I'm always excited about these presentations, to be honest. But always. But this is a really fascinating set of information, really focused on leadership capabilities, the value of strong leadership, and definitely is an area that applies to everyone. So really excited to be with you all. A little background on myself. I've been with Moss Adams for the past 1.5 years, leading the human capital advisory practice. I have been in the HR and human capital space for over 25 years, which is probably why I geek out a little bit about these topics. But let me pass it on to LeeAnn for a quick introduction, and we'll dive in.
Thanks, Brett. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today, spending a little time with us. Really happy to have you here. My name is LeeAnn Stivers. I'm a Senior Manager with the Moss Adams team. I work alongside with Brett in the Human Capital Advisory practice. I have over 20 years of experience in management. I spent over a decade in executive leadership. And I have the pleasure of working with clients, working on development projects, human development projects. So whether that's organizational change management, communications projects, learning development, you name it, I get to help our clients do a lot of this fun work. So super passionate about today's topic and excited to chat with you all about what we have in store for today. So let's just go ahead and jump in.
And LeeAnn, passion is a much better word than geeking out, I think.
You know, whatever. You can use your words. I'll use mine. It's fine. Yeah. Pardon me. So here's what we have for our agenda today. Hopefully some of you were able to see our summary, but we're going to talk about what is an employer of choice and actually what does that mean. So Brett's going to talk about that and we'll define what that looks like. We're also going to talk about core functions of leadership development, give you a little bit more insight into what leadership development means and what that can mean to you and your organization. We also want to discuss how you can increase retention and employee satisfaction, because we know that's important to today's workforce. We've got some cool talent management tips, and then of course we want to leave you with some call to action next steps as you walk away from today's conversation. So that's what we have in store for our agenda. And I will turn it over, if you believe it or not, we've got our first poll. So I'm going to turn it over to Chad to get us going on our poll next steps.
Thanks, LeeAnn. So we have our first polling question of the day. What brings you here today? Either A, interested in leadership development. B, I'm looking for tips to implement leadership development in my organization. C, I need help and would enjoy a discussion on how Moss Adams could support my organization. Or D, I'm going to take the CPE and run. Or E, I'm enjoying spending time with others and learning. So we'll give you about 15 to 20 seconds here to answer this polling question. If you select the answer on your screen and hit the submit button, your polling question will be recorded.
And there's no shame in the CPE and run. There's no judgment here. It's a judgment-free zone.
It reminds me of a song, Come On, Take My CPE and Run. Oh, it's Tuesday.
All right, we'll give everyone about 5 more seconds here. All right, let's check out the results.
All right.
Oh.
Several that are just interested in leadership development, looking for tips on leadership development, their organization. We got some CPE and run, so that's okay too. Like I said, judgment-free zone, so awesome. This really helps us set the stage on our audience, so we appreciate everyone participating in our polls, giving us a sense of the just setting the stage. So thank you all. Okay. So as Brett mentioned, we're super excited to talk about developing leaders to become an employer of choice today. As the workforce continues to shift, talent is a top priority. And, you know, the role of a leader has never been more important. I think we've all learned a lot as the workforce continues to shift and change. But you know what we're learning is research is telling us that most leaders have the right operational skills. And what does operational skills mean? That's like the technical skills. So maybe the core functions of your job duties, you understand how to do those, but many are falling short in their people management skills. So maybe you got leaders have been promoted into a leadership role because they were really great at those technical functions, but maybe they didn't have the skill set to manage a team or individuals. And that is, we've got maybe some gaps in those areas. And so what we want to spend time talking about today is how we can develop leaders and to become an employer of choice. And we also want to discuss how we can increase employee retention and satisfaction, and really building up the skill sets of leaders across your organization, because ultimately that is going to develop your organization and give you the success tools needed to have a strong workforce ultimately. So excited to talk to you all about these important topics. We also have some learning objectives for you all. So in today's session, you will learn how to develop your leaders and to a brand ambassador. So Brett's going to talk about this, especially acquiring new talent. This is something we all want and need in recruiting a new workforce. We also want to create human leadership as a core competency to engage talent. So really diving into what human leadership as a core competency means. And why it's valued in your organization. We're going to talk about delivering an employee-centric experience to increase retention and employee satisfaction. So really, what does that employee-centric experience look like? And how can you explore maybe adding that into your organization today? And what could that look like? We also want to enable managers to be productive in managing current and future talent needs. So we're going to explore all of that in today's conversations. And I'm going to head over to chat again with our next poll.
Great, thanks, LeeAnn. Our second polling question of today is, what does it mean to become an employer of choice? They're A, creating brand and value ambassadors, B, focus on building the right talent for the organization, C, design strategies to prevent talent engagement and retention challenges, D, encourage team development to support future business needs, or E, be the place everyone wants to work. So we'll give you about 15 to 20 seconds to answer this polling question. And if you select your answer and hit the submit button on your screen, your polling question will be recorded.
I'm excited about the answers, LeeAnn. And by the way, for those of you who are listening in, feel free to ask any questions in the chat or whatnot, and we'll get to them as we go through the session, or we'll, time permitting, we'll get them at the end, or we'll respond after the session.
And we'll give everyone a couple more seconds here, get their final answers in.
It's also okay to guess on this one. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. We're going to explore this one.
All right, let's check out the results.
Oh.
All right. Looking like focus on building the right talent for the organization, be the place everyone wants to work. Heavily weighted in those areas. All right.
Be the place everyone wants to work. Fancy.
Okay. Well, Brett, I'm going to kick it on over to you.
Thanks, LeeAnn. And again, thanks you all for joining today. This is as I mentioned earlier, this is a really interesting topic, and it has been surfacing more and more, not only with our clients, but also within some of the events and things like that we speak about. And I think what's interesting about this is we start looking at the whole view of what an employer choice means. And you guys, for those of you, I think was 30-some% answered, yeah, it is. It's the place that you want to work. But the question really comes down to is what does that mean? So one of the things I'm going to do, and I'm not going to ask you to put in the chat if you don't want to, but when you even think about yourself and your own organization, and why you work there, or when you're recruiting people, like what are you telling them that's creating that employer of choice? And one of the terms that I'm going to throw out here is what's called an employer value proposition. And basically, employer value proposition, when we think about becoming an employer of choice, it is really the promise that an organization makes to its potential candidates coming in, but also its current employee base. And an employer value proposition is really what creates an employer choice or not, because it's those employer choices who are actually living up to that value proposition, which means I'm being promised that I'm going to get certain level of development, or I'm going to get certain level of benefits, or I'm going to get a certain level of these. And the organization doesn't just view that as transactional, but really lives it from a cultural perspective. And I think it's really interesting when we start thinking about that as it relates to some of the hiring and recruiting challenges that we're having. I mean, when you're out talking to candidates, whether it's at a job fair, whether you're interviewing them or whatnot, a lot of times someone will ask, well, why should I come work for your company? And a lot of times it's, hey, we got great pay, or where hopefully you have good pay. You've got good benefits. We get to work remote, or we're flexible, or we allowed to bring dogs to work on Friday. Whatever that might be. But what I find really fascinating about this is the one area that I don't hear as much as I should is we have amazing leaders. We have amazing leaders who coach and mentor and guide, live our culture, live our values, and really are helping us as an organization be better, and supporting us for future growth. And so when you look at kind of the why does employer choice matter, one, it is about being a competitive differentiator, right? It's about bringing those right programs as well as people and culture to the forefront. It's letting people understand what is that value proposition of working for your company and what is some of those proven examples that you can show. Because it is interesting. I was at a conference last week, and I was talking to some architects actually, and they were all talking amongst themselves about competing against themselves. And when we start thinking about the skills and capabilities, and now I had to pause them and say, you know what, you're not only just competing against other architecture firms and engineering firms, you're all now competing against Googles and Apples, and all organizations are looking for a lot of similar talent as it relates to leadership skills and capabilities, technology, and all of these things. So really being able to articulate your competitive differentiator is really key. The second piece is about attraction of talent, right? So, if you think about some of the challenges you're facing, ask yourself the question, do you have a well-defined employer value proposition? Are you clearly able to articulate why a employee should work for you? And sometimes you got to ask that yourself, which was kind of my opening question, like, why do I work here? And are these things very tangible, or are they kind of fuzzy? But I will say that having a clear value proposition and being able to demonstrate employer choice, people are knocking on your door wanting to come work for you. They're actually willing to come in at lower paying jobs and work their way up because they know the potential is so much better. And then lastly, engagement and retention. There's proven statistics out there that organizations who, again, are living their promises of being an employer of choice, the retention is so much higher, engagement is so much higher. And it also, we're seeing things around customer satisfaction scores are off the charts, productivity is off the charts, and all of these other things. So when you look at it, it's not just an intangible idea. It's really something that can drive business outcomes. And I think coming back to this full circle, a lot of this has to do with your leadership. And so again, I go back to ask the question, is one of your competitive differentiators your leaders, your strength in your leaders? And the answer might be yes, the answer might be no. And if it's no, then we're glad that you're here. If it's yes, we're still glad you're here. But maybe you could take some tips out of this and look at developing your leaders. So I also wanted to, kind of dive into this a little bit. And you answered this, right? Which is, well, what is an employer choice? Well, you're right. It is the place that people want to work. And that, whether that's, again, I'm a candidate prospect looking for my next job. People don't go work for places they don't want to or has bad reputations, right? People want to go work for the place that everyone's working because it's not only the cool place to work. I'm just kidding, but it is known as a place where you can grow and develop. And whether the pay is competitive, meaning I'm saving flat with others, it's all of these other things that these organizations are doing. So if you look at this list to the right, it is things around culture and reputation. Do people, when you walk up to them and you say, oh, where do you work? I work at so-and-so. Oh, I heard nothing but great things about that. Or they're like, oh, how's that going? How long you been there? It's also around things like meaningful work. Is the work that I'm doing value add to me? Is it contributing to my personal growth and development? I'm not going to hit all of these things, but a couple of the other ones come down to things like work-life balance. Is my culture and the values of the organization are they people-centric and people-focused, right? Or are they just about getting the work done? And then you can see in here kind of the second from the last is strong leadership. Do I have that right leadership skills and capabilities that's going to help me as an employee, and the organization continue to progress and move forward? And this is really where it gets interesting, because if you start unpacking a lot of these ideas in your head, and I'd love to do a working session on this, LeeAnn, like a think tank, right? To really get some ideas, because I know people just want to dump some dirty laundry out, but we won't get into that here. Well, you could put it in the QA if you want, but I just say there's just so impactful when you think about the perspective of the company. In fact, one of the things that's really fascinating here is I did some research on the influence of social media on organization, brand, and culture perception. At least I can read the header. But what I found here was a couple things. So let me kind of even take a step back. So 10, 15 years ago, when some of us were looking for jobs, this is even the job board started to come out. This was all around networking. It was about having conversations with people who are working in organizations, whether that was job fairs, and using that information to help us think about what our next career might look like, where we might want to work and things like that. Well, as you guys know, organizations like Glassdoor and others have really turned this market upside down. And one of the statistics that we're showing here is that, according to Glassdoor, 86 of employees and job seekers research company reviews and ratings to decide where they apply for a job. So this is like going to Amazon now to find a job. It's, hey, which one has the most stars? Which one has the most thumbs up? Now, the second piece is and I'm not going to read these descriptions here, but a lot of the topics that are being searched is around company culture, company leadership, career development, career to growth. I'm not saying that money and basic compensation isn't important, and we could talk about that another time about some other research or people are actually looking for more career growth and pay. But the perception now is so broad that anybody can go and either post or find information about your organization. And you've really got to be careful in terms of what that social perception is. And again, as we look at this, for example, as it relates to leadership, this is a great example of how do we start changing mindsets about who we are as an organization, because no one wants to see bad things posted about culture or leadership and things like that. In fact, the other research is, I think it was around 15% of job applicants actually look at these and will automatically just drop off the board. They won't even consider these, right? Which is, again, if you start looking at this 86, we're getting in some big numbers in terms of the level of influence this social feedback has on your overall organization and gaining new talent, but also retaining talent, right? No one wants to work for companies who, people aren't happy with, right? Because it's impacting them as well. So one of the things I thought was also fascinating, I'm going to even go back a number of years, is really the perception of leaders overall, and kind of look what that timeline and path is. And I think the reality is that, and you mentioned it earlier, LeeAnn, is around the whole concept of operational leaders, right? In many organizations, and I think you're going to spend some time on this later on, but in many cases, when you think about the leadership trajectory, the areas that the organization isn't focusing on is empathy. They're not focusing on coaching and mentoring and being a people-centric leader. They're mostly looking at, hey, this person did a really great job in their current role, let's promote them to manager. Although they have zero management skills, they have no people skills, they have nothing, they end up in a manager role. Now, that's not to say that they don't deserve that role, right? But the question is when we start looking at kind of the future of where organizations are going, you can see that some of the statistics are pretty interesting, which says, hey, for the first time, CEOs don't feel their organization has the right leadership skills and capabilities. Again, we have a whole new set of generation rising to the top. Totally different mindset, very different capabilities. And how do we start thinking about developing those capabilities into some of those more human-centric capabilities? And then the second part of that quote was around, outside of the financial performance implications, poor managers are the top reason for lack of employee trust, development, progression, and attrition. Now, so poor managers have always been a big influencer and factor in terms of employee retention. But I think what we have to learn here is this is a trend that's not going away. We're not seeing a decrease in this. Actually, we're continuing to see this increase. And again, I think a lot of this comes back to how are we developing our own leaders internally Are we developing them with an operational mindset or a people-centric mindset or a combination of both, right? Which is really what we need as organizations. And again, there's another statistic by McKinsey that talks about the decrease in overall leadership and management engagement. So the last thing I'm going to touch on, and then we'll go to another poll, is really, again, focusing on some of this. So we saw from a business side on the last slide, this is really looking at more from an HR side. And Gartner put out an interesting statistic that basically said 90% of HR leaders believe that to succeed in today's work environment, leaders must focus on human aspect, or kind of what I said earlier, aspects of leadership. And this is another challenging question for you, right? So as you think about your leadership program, if you have one, right, and your ability to develop your leaders, what are you really focusing on? Are you focusing on things like building relationships, inspiring others, leading change, listening, engaging? Or are you really focusing more on the operational skill set to get the job done? And it's great to get the job done, but if you don't have the people infrastructure behind you that's supporting you to get the job done and wanting to get the job done, which I think is a very big difference, right? People want to work for people they respect, that engage with them, that they like, right? So you want these people to be part of this, and you have to, this is where the employee-centric leadership really comes in. So I am going to pass it over to our next poll, and then I'm going to go through and skim some of the Q&A pieces that are in here.
Awesome. Thank you, Brett. And our third polling question of the day, as you consider the challenges associated with becoming an employer of choice, which do you primarily face? A negative perception of company culture. B, lack of leadership skills and capabilities for the future. C, leaders who aren't engaged and passionate. Or D, employee trust, development, progression, and attrition. So it'll be about 15 to 20 seconds to answer this polling question. And again, please select your answer and hit the submit button for your polling question to be recorded today.
Be curious to see where this comes in.
What'd you say?
I said I'll be curious to see where people come in on this one.
I really think we need some sort of jazzy music during this time.
You can sing. You can sing for us. I mean,
I already sang earlier. I'm done. My vocal was shot.
I'll give you a couple more seconds here to answer this one. All right, how about we check out the results?
Sounds good. Employee trust, development, progression, and attrition coming in hot, 44%. And then trailing lack of leadership skills and capabilities for the future. Yeah, that tracks, especially with a lot of the conversations that we have with our clients, Brett.
Yep, I agree. I think this is interesting. I love the employee trust development, which goes hand in hand, with, of course, with lack of leadership skills. So
yeah,
fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all for participating. Next, we're going to focus on create human leadership as a core competency to engage talent. So, as we talk about human leadership, many organizations have core competencies set up across their org, and embedding human leadership as a core competency is something we all want you to consider, because we think it is fundamental. But in order for us to have you consider that, we want you to think about some of the leadership facts that we've listed up here. So I'm not going to list all of these out because I know that you all can read, but I want to highlight a couple of them that I think that are really instrumental on this slide. So Brett's slides are leading up to many of these, but a couple of them back them up in terms of 77% of corporations experience leadership gaps and, since 2019. So there's definitely a trend pipeline that's happening across corporations where we are not building a pipeline of leadership skills in corporations because that's almost 80% of corporations that are experiencing leadership gaps since 2019. The other one that really I want to highlight on here is 38% of new leaders fail within the first 18 months. So if we're seeing an almost 40% trend line of new leaders coming into a position that they're then unsuccessful in, that's either they don't have the skills to be successful or they don't have a development path that is helping them be successful. The other one on here that I like to highlight is that 79% of employees will quit their jobs due to the lack of appreciation from leaders. And so I think we all can understand that. We put 40, 50 hours into our jobs each week. And if we're not getting that appreciation and support from our leadership, that doesn't make us want to stay in an organization. And so I don't fault an individual leader for that, to be honest with you. I think obviously that's a component of one individual leader, but I do think that as an organization, an acknowledgement or recognition plan should be at an organization level, or should be something that should be a competency of an organization or some type of infrastructure at an org-wide level. And then each leader should be responsible for leaning into that. So considering what that could look like for your org is something to pull from that statistic. The other one that leads into this goes back to what Brett was talking about, is talking about the pipeline of the workforce that's coming in, which is, by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials, and 63% of the millennials believe that the leadership skills that they have aren't being fully developed. So if they don't have the skills that they need to then grow into the leaders of tomorrow, we have a pipeline gap. And that 77% of the leadership gaps that we've been experiencing since 2019 is only going to grow further. So we need to explore, how do we address this for tomorrow's future and growing into our next workforce goals. So when we
Isn't
talk
that
about,
scary though?
It really is. It really
it's scary.
is.
It scares the heck out of me.
I know, because we have such an opportunity in front of us, and we know we have the talent that's out there. And if we can think about the partnership of our incredible workforce and talent and how to marry the skill set of building out the competency work, we can get there. But it is an investment. And I will say that the organization has to think about this infrastructure. And so this leadership development slide in particular is really a way for your organization to consider how to kind of set up the infrastructure of it. But it does take some legwork on the organization. It's not, it's not easy, and it is an investment, and it's not just on the human resource team. It is a partnership of your executive team, your human resource team, and all of your managers. So I would offer that. But we've kind of broken this into three components, and that's the human leadership component. Brett's referenced this a couple times, this human or employee-centric kind of focus area, and also talent planning. So I'm going to talk about these each individually in separate slides. So let's go ahead and jump into them. So creating a human leadership as a core competency to engage talent. So what does this really mean? When we talk about human leadership, this is all about putting the people first and recognizing that employees are the most valuable asset of any organization. So building learning and development programs focused on human leadership and the importance of leaders and building out empathetic and adaptive programs is a really core fundamental in building out a human leadership program. Learning and development programs focused on this can really build out these skills. And when I say that these are skills, this is an area that does require development. Not everyone has these core competencies. These are not areas that all of us have. And I'll use myself as an example. When I first started I mean, I started managing people, no joke, when I was 20 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. I got put into a management position. I was working at a dorm and I had like 10 people that I had to supervise all of a sudden. I had no idea what I was doing. And they put me into a training course over the summer. And one of the first things that they put me into was an active listening training. And it was the most interesting training I had ever been put into because it actually taught me to not think about what I was going to say when someone was talking to me. And I know that that sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, but it actually was a practice as a 20-year-old kid that I needed to be taught because I didn't know it. And so I think there are assumptions sometimes that we make about skill building over time when it comes to human leadership and development, that thinking through what are those core skill competencies to think through. But really by the human leadership, this isn't just a buzzword or a trend that's out there. It really is a fundamental shift in the way we think about leadership and the role of today's workplace. And so investing in this area and shifting the way in which we engage how we're going to support our leaders and developing those skill sets across your organization really can shift the way in which you engage your talent workforce. Next up is how we deliver an employee-centric experience to increase retention and employee satisfaction. So this one, we've talked about creating leaders that prioritize employee engagement, autonomy, creativity, as well as give employees a sense of security and identity at work. This one, this isn't just about being nice to employees. I really want to call this out. This looks different than just being nice. This is about creating a sense of self, right? So this could look different for your organization. I've seen this through maybe you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program, and you've created affinity groups. Maybe you have fun social gatherings that you have announced each month that you are including your workforce on. Maybe that's a book club. Maybe this is just different ways for employees to lean in so that they can feel a sense of belonging in your organization. There is a sense of connection that we're looking for within this one, that it's not just the job, it's about engagement. Which then allows for a sense of cross-functional work and connection. And by prioritizing this type of engagement and sense of identity, this creates a workplace that fosters innovation, productivity, and ultimately success for your workforce. The next one is talent planning. So talent planning, this allows our leaders to be more in tune with their staffing needs and also supports career development. But talent planning isn't just about filling open positions. This is about creating a pipeline for you to create long-term success for your organization. Especially in a leadership position, you're juggling a lot of different roles, right, and responsibilities. So thinking about those strategic plans that you're holding for your organization, but aligning your workforce planning to those work plans. And trying to think through what that's going to look like, both in current state and in future state. Talent planning also involves understanding career development of your team, which helps understand how you're going to customize that to your team. And this creates some individuality for each of your team members. So this is connection and developing a career path that's going to connect them to the organization and make them feel like they have a succession plan. And connection to the team. So by being more in tune with their staffing needs, this helps you have people in the right roles and also on a succession path within the organization, which hopefully leads to productivity, innovation, and retention within your organization. So I also want to talk about workforce expectations of leadership as a brand ambassador. So this one is interesting. Gallup finds that 70% of the variance in teams' engagement is influenced by a manager. Furthermore, the traditional role of a boss, so the kind of, I would say kind of the old school mentality of a boss role doesn't really work in kind of what we're hearing in today's workforce. This concept of the expectations of the manager is transitioning from more than just a boss. It's kind of moving over to more of what we would call a coach. So the way in which we would look at it in previous state, it's kind of mapped out in this lineup over here, is in the past, it was referred to more as, kind of a hierarchical almost, this, I've got my paycheck and it's, my boss, and I only have my annual review, and here are my weaknesses and my strengths, and this is my overview. Whereas the workforce today, it's looking at this, again, moving into that employee-centric experience. It's looking different. They're talking more about what's my purpose? What is the vision of my role looking forward? What does my development plan look like? Not only my coach, but do I have a mentor? What is that plan looking for me looking forward? I don't just want an annual conversation. I want ongoing conversations so that I know how I'm doing in my performance on a regular basis. What are my strengths also in alignment with my weaknesses and growth edges? And again, not just my job, but how is my job in alignment with my life? So I'm human with my job. Again, back to that employee-centric experience. So I share this because this is a shift in the dynamic of what's happening in workforce expectations. And so I don't say that performance management goes away with this one, right? We all need to manage to performance development. There's always going to be a space for when we need to manage to the details of, if we have performance issues. But this is a shift and change, and I'll even use an example of something that we're doing at Moss Adams. I don't call my supervisor, actually, I'll use Brett as my example. Brett is my career advisor. That's a simple shift in a naming convention that we've done here at our firm, because we look at each other more as a development role, right? And how he can be my coach and lead me through my development with, creating my own practice and what that could look like for me. So I share that because this is not only just future state, but it's happening actively in workforce expectations across teams today. So let's talk a little bit about building the right leadership skills and capabilities. So we gave some examples in here of what future skills look like and how those align with future behaviors and outcomes. So future skills, those would look like coaching, collaboration, people development, that continuous improvement, and strategic thinking, and then aligning those into the future behaviors. So that coaching is then becoming listening, and that collaboration is then becoming trustworthiness. And that those are all aligning to becoming authentic and adaptable and empathetic. And then ultimately, what we want for the outcomes of this would be employee commitment, employee retention, engagement, satisfaction, and performance. So this is just an example slide of what this can look like, but I wanted to let you know that there are opportunities for you to do a skills assessment on your leadership team. If you're looking for something like that, we can help you with that. There's different tools out there for you to take a look at that. But really understanding what are the future skills that your team needs in order to develop them, and then understanding what are the future behaviors that you're looking for, so that you can then understand what type of development path you need to put in place for your teams and how that's going to align to the outcomes that you're looking for ultimately for your employee plan. And I'll turn it over for our next poll.
Awesome. Thanks, LeeAnn. And our fourth and final polling question of the day: for your organization, which is the most important attribute of a leader? A, human leadership; B, employee-centric; C, talent planning; excuse me, or D, none of the above; or E, all of the above. So if you select your answer and hit the submit button, your polling question will be recorded. Give you about 15 to 20 seconds here. Give everyone about 5 more seconds on this one. All right, how about we check out the results?
Interesting.
Hey, human leadership, all of the above. Couldn't agree more, but definitely human leadership and then employee centric. I agree. Yeah, building out the core competency for human leadership is really fundamental, I would say. Yeah, go ahead, Brett. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd say surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised. I think these are your statistics, but I find what's interesting about this is that when I think, and I agree, human leadership, employee centric, but talent planning is your ability to really be proactive in understanding your employee base, right? So who are the high performers? Who are the, well, we won't go into the other ones, but who are the high performers, right? What is the talent, skills, and capabilities that you have? This gets a little bit more into the operational side. What are the talent and capability gaps that you are missing, and really putting together a plan not only to close those gaps now, but then also looking forward in terms of some of the organizational goals and strategies and goals and maybe growth trajectories or whatever, and really putting together the right hiring plans ahead of time, which we often call workforce planning, to mitigate those talent gaps, right? So I think, to me, like, this is, I totally get one of the top two, but I think it's probably an area where, especially where you see where we are, that most people are having, it's a talent supply demand issue. I question that. That's for drinks over another time. But really, looking at preparing yourself for these talent challenges ahead of time. And being able to mitigate some of those risks.
Okay, Brett, that's over to you.
Over to me. Well, thank you. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this, or at least taken away 1 or 2 little nuggets that you can apply in your own organization. And I was distracted. I'm responding to some of these Q&As coming in. But yeah, what we'll do is we have a few minutes left after I go through these call to action, so we can open it up for some questions. But one of the things I would really encourage you all to do is, first and foremost, evaluate your human focused attributes of your leaders. Like, what does it mean for you to be human focused? Right. And again, this isn't just I want to write down 5 things on a whiteboard. These are things that you really got to look much broader at and say, what is our company culture? What are our values? Right. And how do all of these things really influence what that human focused definition is? And then from there, really got to go out and say, hey, do our leaders have this? Like, what human focused gaps are we missing? I think the second thing is to find what capabilities are needed to become an employer of choice. So again, this is a great opportunity to take a look in the mirror and say, why do I work here? And if you can't answer that question, then you probably need to figure it out. Because if as you're out talking to others about who you are and what you do, again, that question comes up. Oh, what's so great about working in your company? And if you can't answer the question, why would I work there? In fact, I was at a session last year in Dallas, and I posed that same question, and no one could answer it. I got a couple little fringe remarks, but nothing really. So the question gets back is, what is your employer value proposition? The second is develop your leaders with a focus on human or people centricity. So LeeAnn did a great job outlining this. It's really about the coaching, the mentoring, the empathy. It's about putting yourself in the shoes of your employee. It's about listening. Yes, we need those operational skills because that's how the work gets done. But we got to look much broader and at some of these human-based skills and capabilities. Create a human-focused performance management goals, measures, and awards. So, as we look at some of these things, and again, as we go to a lot of our clients, a lot of this, especially some of I would say kind of the smaller clients, haven't really grasped the concept or really put frameworks in place around performance management. But it's a major indicator, and it doesn't take a ton of work. You can do it fairly simply, but it's really allowing you a great visibility into who your workforce is, the value that they're bringing to the organization, and it's providing you some very tangible metrics. And then the next piece is the whole rewards, right? Which I'm not going to get into right now, but really start looking broadly at the total rewards package. And total rewards doesn't equal base pay or compensation. It's what are all of the rewards and recognition that you're bringing to the table. LeeAnn mentioned about managers not giving feedback, right? That is a great example of a very simple reward, whether that's through your performance process, whether that's through an ongoing process or system or whatever. Track and manage and the shift based on the results. So, one of the things that I hear a lot when we go in and talk to clients about really redefining their leadership strategy is, well, I don't see results. I don't want to invest too much because I didn't get a return. And the reality is a course that I'm going to sit in is only as good as how I apply it. And so this is where, as you're going in and you're thinking about these development courses and thinking about bringing in people to help train and enable your leaders, it's not a one and done, right? This is a mindset and a behavior change, right, that needs to take place. And I will also say this, and I'll just be very transparent. If your CEO isn't acting this way, why should I? Right? So listen, people, lead by example, and I learn by example. And if my CEO is doing the complete opposite, then why should I care about any of these things? And so this is an area where I think we all have to embrace and move forward. And being able to track and manage these things, to me, allows us to see, and it's not about, hey, we're managing engagement, we're managing retention, we're managing employee performance, we're managing, maybe cultural or employee satisfaction in terms of cultural metrics, right? It's not necessarily about, hey, we increase X amount of revenue. That will come, and then customer satisfaction will come, but we've got to really start creating a baseline. And then I think the last is, really creating a diverse and inclusive workplace that values and respects all its employees. And so this really gets back to, this isn't a one and done, right? When we think about leadership, you have a leadership who manages 100 people, or you have a leader might manage none. Maybe they're just an organizational influencer. But they're still people leader. They're influencing people on projects or just influencing people in their day to day. And I think so as we think about these traits, look at them holistically. Look across the workforce at your next generation coming up, at your retirees who've got a number of years left. How can we use one to support the other? So I know there's a lot here, and this is really great where a leadership strategy comes into play. And I'm, I would ask this question too, but no one will probably admit to it. But how many of you actually have a leadership program? How many are you actually doing these things? And it's not don't be embarrassed if you're not. A lot of organizations aren't, but we are really at a tipping point where we've got to really start rethinking who the people are who are leading our overall organization. That's all I have to say about that, LeeAnn.
Great. Well, I know that we have just 5 minutes left. So I know Brett was responding to some Q&As in the Q&A. So we will do responses back to you directly, because I don't think we'll have enough time to open it up. So Chad, I think we'll just turn it over to you to close out, and we can reach out to respondents directly with their questions to make sure we get to everybody.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Brett and LeeAnn, for a great presentation today. Like LeeAnn said, if we didn't have time to answer your questions today, we'll do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. As a reminder, if you attended today's presentation in a group and would like to receive CPE credit, you must complete the group attendance sheet found in the slide deck and handouts window. If you participated as an individual and met the certification requirements, your certification is available for download now in the CPE progress window. I'll keep the webcast open for a few minutes to give you time to download your CPE certificate. A copy of your CPE certificate will be emailed within 3 weeks should you have any difficulty downloading it now. Here's a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this as your survey is very important to us. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.